Hey everyone, today we have a different type of video. A video about my top 12 favorite Zelda enemies. Why 12? Do I really need to explain that? Number 12. Tektite. Now, why do I like Tektites? Probably because they've been in most Zelda games. They never really annoyed me too much, unlike other fast-moving enemies. And
well, I ain't scared of no goddamn Tektite.
Number 11. Octorok. Octoroks have appeared in more Zelda games than any other enemy, only being absent from one game in the series so far, Twilight Princess. But since they seem to be there in spirit with the fire tadpoli and water tadpoli, I'll give it a pass. It's on thin ice though, because of the lack of Octoroks. Starting as a land-based creature in the first 4 games, it made its jump to an aquatic enemy in Ocarina of Time and other 3D games. Also, because of their similarities, I'm gonna add Deku shrubs to this number 11 spot, just because I like to be weird. Octoroks became land-based enemies again in Skyward Sword, and an all-around enemy in Breath of the Wild, so for that, they've earned this number 11 spot. Number 10. Flare Dancers. Now, Flare Dancers kinda straddle the line between a mini-boss and an enemy. I see them as a high enemy, or a high-level enemy, as they appear multiple times in the same dungeon. These guys are really unique and have a very memorable fight. And because of that, they've made my number 10 spot. Number 9. Moblands. Spawn of Ganon himself, Moblands are one of the OG enemies of Zelda. Shooting projectiles in most 2D games, although they do use spears as hand weapons in Zelda 2, I am most fond of Moblands in their Wind Waker incarnation, something I'm going to be repeating later on. They were originally planned to appear in Twilight Princess, but I think the developers made the right choice keeping them as beta monsters. Number 8. Stalfos. Whether they wield 2 swords, or a sword and a shield, or even more weapons than that, they are cool. Something about skeletal warriors is creepy and fascinating to me. Take a look at the skeletons from Jason and the Argonauts, or in Army of Darkness. Warrior skeletons are just cool. The stall enemies in Breath of the Wild were a nice touch. It's cool to see that different monsters turn out that way in this game. I just wish they had regular Stalfos. I'm pretty partial to the Stalfos in Ocarina of Time, but I have to say that my favorite looking Stalfos are that of Twilight Princess. Number 7. Wiz Ropes. These guys always had my interest, but they made it onto this list again because of Wind Waker. Their toucan-inspired design always got to me and made me smile. Much more appealing than the Majora's Mask incarnation. I'm still trying to decide whether or not I love or hate their Breath of the Wild look. Number 6. Stalfos. I was always partial to Lizardmen characters. In Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube, I liked playing as Link, obviously, and the Lizardman. I even painted the Warhammer Lizardmen miniatures back when I painted models. There's just something cool about warrior lizard people. And since Zelda 2, which was the first game to have lizard-type characters, I'll include Stalfos and Dari, and I'd also like to include Dinolfos, as they're basically the same enemies. Number 5. Bokoblins. I have to admit, I fell in love with these guys in their first game, Wind Waker. Twilight Princess changed their design, which was okay, but just okay. I straight up hated them in Skyward Sword. I thought they looked ugly, and were far too many of them, but Breath of the Wild brought the goofy guys from Wind Waker back. A lot of enemies in Zelda just walk back and forth when they're not fighting, or just stand there waiting. But the Bokoblins would operate searchlights, look through telescopes, and even fall asleep. While that's pretty normal for enemies in Breath of the Wild, Bokoblins really started it back in Wind Waker. Number 4. Gibdos and Redeads. Originating as dungeon-crawling enemies in the original Legend of Zelda, they evolved over the years into nightmare-inducing scream fests. They have made a lasting impact on me, and I'm sure many others. The simple fact that you can burn the bandages of a Gibdo off and it turns into a Redead have to show their similarities. Although, in A Link to the Past, when you burn the bandages off a Gibdo, it turns into a Stalfos. So, there's that. And even though the cartoony graphics might fool you, the Wind Waker version of Redeads are especially terrifying. The empty eye sockets gave me nightmares. Number 3. HiNox. Making its debut in A Link to the Past as a large enemy throwing bombs, but becoming larger as a mini-boss in Link's Awakening, and appearing in Breath of the Wild with a modern flair and an ass that just won't quit, this giant Cyclops is only missing its old school bombs in its newest incarnation. Number 2. Lino. Take a step back for a second. Back to the original Legend of Zelda. You take the advice of the old man and follow the river to the source of the waterfall, and see a centaur creature guarding a cave. Thanks to the game's manual, you know it's a Lino, the guardian who attacks all those who come near Death Mountain. Watch out, he's pretty strong, and Link's little shield can't stop his sword. You defeat him, and the manual is right. He's pretty strong. Considering the enemies you fought thus far take 1 or 2 hits, and this guy takes way more than that. And once you deal the final blow and enter the cave to win your prize, a new, more powerful sword, you can't even grab it. Fast forward, you see a Lionel in Link to the Past, a few in the Oracle games, then nothing for 12 years. Until the sequel to A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds. But that is not why he's on this list. When Breath of the Wild was released, I tried to keep in the dark about what was in the game, as much as I could. The first Lionel I came across, like many I think, was the red Lionel on Ploymus Mountain, near Zora's domain. When I saw it, I shat my pants. I was blown away. The Lionel was so dissimilar to other enemies in the game, with attacks like charging, a mighty downward strike, a ranged attack with its bow that shot multiple arrows, and even breathing fire. But all that is worth it for the spoils of mighty weapons and high-level crafting materials. These guys are crazy. They are insanely fun to fight once you know how to fight them, and, well, like the Octorok says, if stepped on by this, you will go poof, starts with an H, and ends with an oof. And finally, the number 1 Zelda enemy, in the opinion of this lowly YouTuber, of course, the Dark Nut and Iron Knuckle. Now I know what you're thinking, and I know these are 2 very different enemies. What am I saying? They're practically the same. If you didn't name them differently from the first and second Zelda game, we wouldn't have 2 different enemies. Considering how drastic some enemies' design changes are from one game to another, I can see an Iron Knuckle and a Dark Nut being the same thing. Strong, armor-clad warriors. In the 8-bit games, you needed to attack them with strategy. In the N64 games, the Iron Knuckle wields an axe and has one of the coolest introduction scenes in Ocarina of Time. And by dealing 4 hearts of damage with one single hit, it'll kill you instantly if you're doing a 3-heart challenge. Starting out slow and after shedding its armor, it moves faster. In Wind Waker, the Dark Nut acts very similarly, and evolves in Twilight Princess to become a more human and less jackal enemy. Even though these guys don't possess a great threat in small numbers, they're always fun to fight, and always awesome. But when you're fighting 3 or more, well, you need some quick reflexes. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Meant to get it out sooner, but that didn't happen. If you like this video, please consider liking it and sharing it. Subscribed if you haven't already, and as always, thanks for watching. If you want to be a super fan, you can visit my Patreon page and consider throwing me a few bones. No pressure though. Good night, everybody.